Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and it's time for another story time. We are at part 5 of this narrative campaign, so it is starting to draw to a conclusion, or draw to a close, whatever you want to say. So I'm going to give a recap of what happened in missions 4A and 4B, and then I'm going to talk about what's happened since then, and set up the story for missions 5A and 5B. So of course, if you have not yet watched the previous story times for the Storms of Ixia 40k narrative campaign, or watching the previous battle reports, there are going to be major spoilers here. So be warned. So basically what happened last time? Well, a couple things. Captain Wisen's forces were driven out of Foundry Primaris by the Tyranids, as we saw in mission 4A. They just weren't able to hold on to the onslaught. The Tyranids came from the tunnels underneath and then spilled forth so many troops. And then the Carnifexes rained down from the sky, and the barbed hero duel came across the bridge, and they just managed to pretty much drive back his forces as much as possible. So Captain Wisen and his forces lost Foundry Primaris. They can only hope that they sent enough spare parts back up to the frigate Ixia so that it can get repaired enough for them to get out of here before the rest of the High Fleet arrives, because they're still a ways back out of the system using conventional methods to get there, because they can't go faster than light when they're in system. Meanwhile, Warboss Gruffnod had his own ideas, and he decided to lead a boarding party against the frigate. So he built all sorts of boarding vehicles, or just cobbled together, but who knows what, and he launches forward, and he crashes into the ship, and he starts spilling forward into the hallways, and he's set on taking over the ship and killing all its crew and taking it for himself. Commissar Khrushchev was actually on board at that time in the medical bay because he was getting some new limbs attached to him. He's pretty much, he's become a lot of cybernetic parts, slowly becoming like Darth Vader from Star Wars as he gets limb after limb and part after part replaced by a metallic component. And so he leads a desperate assault. He actually cracked a bunch of guys out of prison, and so there's a bunch of conscripts that he pulled together and led an assault against them. And he even got so desperate that he ordered their heavy weapons to start firing, not on the orcs, but on the floor and the walls and the hull of the ship, so they could punch holes in it that would then suck the orcs into space through decompression. And he was actually very successful with this tactic. Almost too successful, because he managed to, most of the orc forces died to being pulled out into the cold void of space, including Warboss Gruffnod himself. But it also it caused serious damage to the frigate. Commissar Khrushchev himself led an assault, or braced for an assault against Warboss Gruffnod. But as Gruffnod charged in, he realized who he was fighting against, and actually was afraid. He was afraid of Commissar Khrushchev because of just all the parts that he had become, and because of the notoriety that he had, his infamy that he had from standing up against orcs in the first fight, first off, and then against the Tyranids and everybody else too. So he was afraid for a moment, but then managed to just swipe him down with his power claw nonetheless, and so Khrushchev went down again. Will we be seeing him again? We'll have to find out later on. So after that though, Gruffnod actually got pulled out into space with the rest of his orcs. He was only partially wounded, he was just a little wounded, and he got pulled out. And the Imperium breathed, or the Imperial Guard breathed a sigh of relief as they figured that they had defeated the orc boarders. But we'll come back to them in just a second. Meanwhile, back on the planet Ixia, Munatius finally reveals the contents of the crate. Inside of it is a powerful artifact from the warp. Now, why does he have a warp artifact? Well, he confides with Caius, his other Freeblade brother, that he's actually allied with a Space Marine chapter that almost 10,000 years ago was pulled into the warp on the planet that they were on. So they're on they're one of their founding planets, and the entire planet got pulled into the warp, and they were lost there. And he was part of that too. He was aligned with them at the time, and so, you know, had a strong allegiance to them and to all the missions that they had done together. And then from time to time, this planet would flicker back into reality. And in one of these times, he got separated from the rest of the Space Marine chapter. And on the world that he was separated from, he also found a warp artifact that he realized he could use to open up a warp rift. But the problem with that is, in order to use it, he had to kind of activate it, which would require, in this case, lots of sacrifices to one of the Chaos Gods. And Munatius, He's not chaos. He will not succumb to chaos and kill billions of people just so he's satisfied enough of bloodlust or whatever to then create enough of a warp disturbance to do it. So he's held on to it all this time, hoping that he could find another way to use it. And he finally thinks that he has. He tells Caius that what he plans to do, now that he's found this planet that is just so powerful with the warp already because of all the warp storms around, he plans to activate it here. And by activating it, hopes to open up a rift, and he hopes then to be able to go back into the warp and find his Space Marine chapter so he can get back to them. Caius, feeling honor-bound to Munatius, agrees to help him. He also kind of has an ulterior motive that he's wanted by the Imperium, especially by the Blood Angels, so he just doesn't see much of a future back here. And maybe there's a hive fleet that's kind of pushing for them to leave, and so it seems like a way out. And so Caius, plus all the Imperial Guard who are allied with him, decide to help out Munatius, and Munatius activates the artifact, which slowly builds up energy. And while it's building up this energy, both the Orcs and the Tyranids sense the increased warp presence and both go after it. The Orcs, led by Blitzadaka, who is still licking his wounds from his last battle and have just barely repaired his Morkanaut, decides that he's going to get that power for himself because it'll make him more powerful, and that's just what he wants. And he's still maybe a little ashamed of the loss that he had against the Imperial Guard. And so going there, and also the Tyranids then move in, sensing that this thing is just disturbing the warp more, and their hive fleet's arriving, and if they don't want to get thrown into another warp storm, so they want to shut it down, they want to destroy it. And so we're going to have that battle in Mission 5B. In Mission 5A, it is titled Gruffnod's Revenge, because Gruffnod, despite all the odds, thanks to his orky constitution, manages to claw his way back through an airlock back into the ship, into the frigate, and he's determined, if I can't have it, nobody can. And he starts to charge his way through to the engine room or a generator or anything he could find to help destroy the ship. And he's taken all the Imperial Guard by surprise because they're not expecting Orcs in this area, and he's slaughtering them as he gets his way through there. And on his way, he starts to come back into communication with some of the Orcs who are still alive on the frigate, and he rallies them, or intimidates them, and tells them basically the orders are to destroy certain key areas of the frigate, because combine that with all the damage the frigate currently has and the increased warp storm from this device being activated, it should take down the frigate. And so in Mission 5A, we're going to see a smaller game played on this table, on the Zone Mortalis table, the Forge World Zone Mortalis table, where Gruffnod is going to be scattered throughout with all his forces, and the Imperial Guard are going to be leading an even more desperate attempt because they're totally not prepared for this one. Because the other one, they at least saw the Orcs coming. This one, they're just springing up all over the place as they close in to destroy things. Khrushchev won't be in this one, though, because he is still being repaired or healed or whatever happens to be. So Mission 5A will be our smaller game on the Zone Mortalis board, and Mission 5B will be available in the vault. It'll be a larger game, a three-way battle. It'll be Tyranids versus Imperial Guard and the Imperial Knights versus Orcs versus Tyranids versus Orcs versus Imperial Guard. It's going to be awesome. So a lot of people have been asking for three-way battles, and you're going to get one. That's, of course, available in the Vault, which you can click the links below to go and watch these missions. And 5B, when you go to the Vault, if you're not a Vault member right now, you can still sign up for free for 7 days, get instant access to everything, and try it out for yourself. And if you don't like it, you can cancel, but we know you're going to like it. The majority of people who sign up do keep it, and it does help support us and allows us to make all these videos. So thank you for watching. Click the links below to go watch the missions right now, and happy wargaming.